going around the country with the town halls.
Yeah.
And at that point, you said we were listening to the people so we can get the issues. You came with the 4 issues as Azimio. And when the president then said, let us sit down and have some bipartisan talks, it was clear what Azimio was taking to the table. These are the 4 issues. Since then, those issues appear now to have taken a backseat when it comes to the issue of tax. And I'm using this in reference to the calls for Friday's demonstrations.
Yeah.
In the run-up to Friday's demonstrations, it was not about these 4 issues. It was about now civil disobedience when it comes to tax. And we said, this is a call for tax boycott. We have moved the messaging from cost of living, from IEBC, from multipartyism and all. We are saying now, let us walk to work, let us carpool, let us do this and the other. But come Friday, you are not carpooling. You are not walking to the demonstrations. You're not using public means, like encouraging us to use public means and cram ourselves into PSVs, and in fact, we even load ourselves into double the capacity of PSVs. You, the leaders, are still driving in your big vehicles, and you know what that publicly means. So people get confused with what exactly is the Azimio message every time they call us out to demonstrate.
I think there's something you're missing.
What's that?
The finance bill is about cost of living. And I have just said that the issue number 1. So when we are talking about tax boycott, it's all about cost of living. You cannot, at this time, when people are so economically battered, start raising taxation. You forget to raise the pay. You raise taxation to a person who is already unable to afford 3 meals a day for themselves and their families, to a person who has already fallen in arrears on fees. And on top of the usual taxation pay as you earn, you are now imposing a taxation for housing in quotes. We don't know whose houses, because for some of these low earners, and they are the majority, they would have to take close to 70 years to merit a house, say, of 2 million shillings. So what housing are you taxing them? A housing fund which is not for them and which they have not identified as a priority. Remember, the Constitution also gives us the right for public participation.
True.
Where did people say that they wanted houses? People have spoken. The media has done polling, the various media houses, and over 90% didn't want that taxes. So you are imposing a punitive and oppressive tax to an already battered population. You are raising the taxation on fuel from 8 to 16%, making transportation and having a ripple effect which makes everything else go up, including food, on people who cannot afford a meal a day. Because there are some households that are going without a meal. So it is unconscionable. Taxation must look at the situation of the person being taxed. And if you look at our Constitution, Article 43, social and economic rights, it's the responsibility of the state to ensure that people have adequate food. That means that those who cannot afford, the state has to step in. Health, it's also an issue the state must take up. Water, housing, and also education.
So housing
among
is there.
Other. Housing, what that means is that you have programs that provide housing. Housing has been on the table ever since the Kibaki government came in. It was taken a step further. And you remember during the Kibaki government, the Kibra houses were done. During Uhuru's tenure, and I'll call it Uhuruto because both of them were there, houses were done in Nairobi and Mombasa. Houses have been done all the time, but people have not been forcefully
made to
tax
for it.
Actually, literally removing food on the plates of the most oppressed. You exempt helicopter owners from taxation on parts but you remove food subsidies in a country where the constitution tells you that you have to ensure that nobody stays without the basic needs. So we are saying our message has not moved. The
So
call
it's
to
still
action,
the same.
the call to action is diverse actions from tax boycott. You asked why we are not working. If I tell you about myself, long before the taxation issue came, I always carpool. In fact, there are meetings we have appeared in one car with Eugene at times, with other people. Carpooling is not a new thing to us. Even to do the things we do, we have to cut costs of how we operate. So we are not telling people things we have not done.
So when
we
you-
carpool.
When you say, let's have a tax boycott,
Yeah.
how exactly do we boycott these taxes? How do we not pay the housing fund, housing levy? How do we not pay the extra 8% VAT on fuel? How do we not pay excise on airtime and the rest? How do we boycott these taxes?
Tax avoidance is not an offense. So you can find innovative ways. Like buying from a mama boga means you're not paying the 16% VAT. So you can avoid taxation anywhere where you can avoid it. Buy less fuel by carpooling. And I'm saying carpooling is something we already practice. It doesn't mean that I'll now park my car and start using a matatu. If I have to, I will. But there are other innovative ways, carpooling with friends, minimizing the places you go to, all those things. We are not talking of things that are not practical. And asking the matatu
So it's
people,
what you're basically saying is, let's cut our costs.
cut our costs and avoid.
It's not a tax boycott.
It's a tax boycott.
If I cut my costs, Martha, that's not necessarily a tax boycott. You're basically just telling me, you know what, Eric, times are tough, so adjust your life. Adjust your life, go to a lower house so that now the amount of rent that you pay that goes into the tax, into the housing tax is less in terms of rental income is less. Take up a pay cut so that the amount of money that you then deducted in terms of 1.5% of your income. That is me adjusting my livelihood.
No,
Martha,
it's also
tax.
about those who can will boycott. Remember, not everybody is even in the mainstream of paying taxes. So you find ways to avoid giving this illegitimate regime the money they are so hungry for. And you can see already through the court, the stay has given Kenyans relief, even if just for a few days, because the taxation that applies today is the taxation of yesterday. And it appears that those in the illegitimate